In this episode, we're going to build a plain language glossary of essential terms that appear again and again across AI security management, so you can recall them quickly without getting trapped in jargon. When learners are new, the hardest part is often not the idea itself, but the feeling that the words are slippery and unclear. A strong glossary does not just define terms. It gives you a mental picture of what the term points to and why it matters in real governance work. That matters for the AI Security Manager, AAISM, exam because questions often assume you can recognize a concept instantly, even if the wording is slightly different. The goal is to make these terms feel familiar and stable, so you can focus on reasoning rather than decoding language. You will also notice that many terms connect to each other, and understanding those connections is what turns memorization into understanding. By the end, you should have a set of plain explanations you can repeat daily to strengthen recall and reduce confusion. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful first cluster of terms centers on governance, because governance is the system that makes decisions consistent and owned. Governance is the process by which an organization sets direction, assigns authority, and ensures decisions are followed, especially when there are competing priorities. Program management is the ongoing work of coordinating goals, tasks, timelines, and measurement so governance decisions turn into real behavior over time. Decision rights are the boundaries of who is allowed to approve certain choices, such as approving a use case, approving data access, or approving deployment. Accountability means a person or role is responsible for outcomes and must answer for decisions, while ownership means a specific person or role is responsible for maintaining a system and its controls over time. Escalation is the defined path for moving a decision upward when people disagree or when risk is high, and it prevents paralysis or unsafe shortcuts. Policy is the high-level rule that states what must be true and why, while standards define mandatory minimum requirements. Guidelines provide recommended practices, and procedures define repeatable steps for execution. These governance terms matter because many exam questions are really testing whether you will build clarity of authority and evidence rather than relying on informal judgment. Now let's define terms that describe risk in a way beginners can use immediately. Risk is the chance that something bad happens combined with how harmful it would be if it did happen. Threat is something that could cause harm, such as misuse, manipulation, or unauthorized access, while vulnerability is a weakness that makes harm easier, such as poor access control or unclear policy. Impact is the consequence of harm, such as financial loss, legal consequences, or harm to people, and likelihood is how probable the harm is given the conditions. Risk tolerance is how much risk the organization is willing to accept, and risk appetite is a broader statement of how aggressively the organization is willing to take risk to achieve goals. Mitigation is the act of reducing risk by adding controls or changing scope, while residual risk is the risk that remains after mitigation. Risk acceptance is a formal decision by an authorized owner that the remaining risk is acceptable, and it is important because it makes the decision explicit and defensible. Control is a safeguard that reduces risk, and evidence is the proof that controls exist and are followed. These terms matter because AI governance is filled with trade-offs, and the exam often rewards answers that show disciplined risk thinking rather than emotional reactions. Next are terms related to compliance and defensibility, because many AI security programs are judged by whether they can be proven. Conformity is the ability to demonstrate that you meet a defined requirement, whether that requirement comes from regulation, contract, or internal policy. Requirement is a specific expectation that must be met, and a testable requirement is one that can be verified with clear evidence rather than opinion. Audit is an independent review of whether controls and processes meet expectations, and an audit trail is the record of actions and decisions that supports accountability. Due diligence is the investigation performed before adopting a system or vendor, while due care is the ongoing attention required to maintain reasonable protection over time. Documentation is the set of records that explain decisions, controls, and outcomes, And traceability is the ability to follow a decision from obligation to requirement to control to evidence. Defensible means that a decision and its supporting evidence can withstand scrutiny from regulators, customers, and internal leadership. Exception is an approved deviation from a standard rule, and a time-bound exception is one that expires unless it is renewed through a defined process. These terms connect to the idea that compliance is not only about good intentions, but about provable, repeatable behavior. When you can define these plainly, you can see why evidence and governance routines keep showing up across tasks. Now let's define terms that describe AI systems in plain language, because you do not need to be an engineer to understand what these terms mean in governance. AI system is a combination of software, data, and processes that produces outputs that appear intelligent, such as predictions, recommendations, or generated text. Model is the learned component that maps inputs to outputs based on patterns learned from data. Training is the process of adjusting a model using data so it can perform a task, while inference is the act of using the trained model to produce outputs for new inputs. Dataset is a collection of data used for training, testing, or operation, and data provenance is the record of where data came from and what permissions or limitations apply. Prompt is the input instruction given to a language-oriented AI system, and output is what the system produces in response. Drift is the gradual change in system performance or behavior over time as data patterns or usage changes, and it matters because a system that was safe at launch can become unsafe later. Fine-tuning is a way to adapt an existing model to a specific context, which can improve usefulness but can also introduce new risk if data is sensitive or biased. Dependency is something the system relies on, such as a vendor service or data source, and dependencies matter because they can change outside your control. These terms help you understand how the system behaves across a life cycle and why governance must include monitoring and change control. Terms related to data deserve special focus because data is often the biggest driver of AI risk. Data classification is the labeling of data by sensitivity and obligations, such as confidential, internal, or public. Data minimization is using only the data necessary for a purpose, which reduces exposure and simplifies compliance. Access control is limiting who can view or use data and systems, and least privilege is the principle of granting only the access needed for a role. Retention is how long data is kept, and deletion is the controlled removal of data when it is no longer needed or when obligations require it. Data integrity is the assurance that data has not been changed improperly, and it matters because corrupted training data can produce harmful model behavior. Data leakage is the exposure of sensitive information to unauthorized parties, and with AI systems, leakage can occur through outputs, not just through stolen files. Sensitive output is an output that contains confidential information or personal details that should not be revealed, and it matters because it can harm people and violate obligations. Logging is the creation of records about system actions, which supports monitoring and investigations, while monitoring is the ongoing review of signals to detect problems early. These data terms connect directly to practical controls, and the exam often tests whether you understand data risk across the entire life cycle rather than only during storage. Another set of essential terms focuses on evaluation, validation, and oversight, because AI systems must be proven safe enough before and after deployment. Validation is the process of confirming the system meets defined requirements, and it is not only about accuracy, because safety and compliance requirements must also be validated. Testing is the act of exercising the system to see how it behaves, and stress testing is intentionally pushing it into edge cases to reveal failure modes. Impact assessment is a structured evaluation of how the system could affect people, the business, and compliance obligations, and it produces actionable decisions about controls and oversight. Monitoring plan is the defined approach for what will be watched, how often, and what triggers escalation, which matters because risk can evolve after deployment. Human oversight is the ability for humans to review, challenge, and correct outcomes, especially in high-impact contexts, and it reduces the risk of blind automation. Change control is the process of managing updates so they do not introduce new risk without review, and it matters for AI because behavior can change with new data, new prompts, or vendor updates. Incident is an event that causes or threatens harm, such as data exposure or unsafe outputs. And incident response is the organized method for containing harm, collecting evidence, and restoring trust. Root cause is the underlying reason something happened, which matters because fixing symptoms without addressing cause leads to repeated incidents. These terms tie together the idea that AI safety is maintained through a continuous loop, not assumed after launch. Now let's cover terms related to fairness, transparency, and trust, which appear when AI outcomes affect people in meaningful ways. Bias is a systematic pattern that produces unfair or inaccurate outcomes for certain groups, often due to data patterns or design choices. Fairness is the expectation that outcomes are not unjustly different across groups, especially in high-impact decisions like hiring or lending. Transparency is the clarity about what the system does, what it is for, and what limits it has, so stakeholders are not misled. Explainability is the ability to provide understandable reasons for certain outcomes, especially when decisions must be challenged or justified. Accountability, in this context, means someone is responsible for the system's behavior and can take action when outcomes are harmful. Trust is the belief that the system is safe and reliable enough for its intended use, and it is built through evidence, not through confident marketing. High-impact use is a context where errors or unfairness can cause serious harm, which usually demands stronger oversight, stronger validation, and clearer documentation. Misuse is the use of the system in ways that violate policy or increase risk, and misuse can be accidental, not only malicious. These terms matter because ethical risk can turn into compliance and reputational risk quickly, and AI governance must manage it deliberately. When you define these terms plainly, you can recognize why certain scenarios require deeper review and clearer evidence. Finally, it helps to define terms that describe how the organization manages AI at scale, because scale changes everything. Inventory is the organized record of what AI systems exist, who owns them, what they touch, and where they are used, and it is the foundation for control. Tiering is the classification of systems by risk level, which helps the organization apply appropriate oversight without slowing everything equally. Lifecycle is the sequence from idea to design to data used to training to deployment to monitoring to retirement, and it matters because risks appear differently at different stages. Retirement is the controlled end of a system's use, including removing access and handling data properly, which reduces long-term exposure. Integration is the alignment of AI security with the broader enterprise security program, so AI does not become an unmanaged island. Metrics are measurements that help leaders decide whether the program is working, and good metrics are tied to decisions and outcomes rather than mere activity. Continuous improvement is the habit of using lessons learned to refine policies, procedures, and controls over time, rather than treating governance as static. When you keep these management terms straight, you can reason through how governance becomes repeatable and defensible as AI use expands. As we wrap up, the purpose of an essential terms glossary is not to make you sound impressive, but to make your thinking faster, clearer, and more accurate under exam pressure. Governance terms help you see who decides and how decisions stay consistent. Risk terms help you prioritize and choose defensible actions, and compliance terms help you understand why evidence and traceability matter. AI system terms help you picture how models, data, prompts, and outputs behave across a life cycle, while data and oversight terms help you connect obligations to controls, validation, monitoring, and change control. Fairness and transparency terms help you recognize when outcomes create real business risk, especially in high-impact contexts, and management terms help you see how programs scale and stay reliable over time. If you practice these definitions out loud, you will notice that many questions become easier because the language stops being a barrier. The exam is testing understanding and judgment, and plain language mastery of these terms gives you the foundation to apply that judgment consistently. With these terms solid, you will be ready to move into more specific tasks while keeping your reasoning grounded and defensible.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.